The world watched in horror as Europe exploded in 1939. The Nazi war machine, led by Adolf Hitler, began its rampage, swallowing Poland and drawing in Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. While Europe burned, Japan sought dominance in Asia, setting the stage for a confrontation with the United States. The attack on Pearl Harbor thrust the US into a brutal fight for survival in the Pacific. Japan's military leaders, driven by nationalism, believed in their destiny to rule Asia. Their expansion began with Manchuria in 1931 and escalated with the invasion of China in 1937. The attack on Pearl Harbor shattered American isolationism, leading the US to join the Allies in World War II. The Pacific War, a brutal struggle for control, had begun. The battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa foreshadowed the human cost of invading mainland Japan. The Manhattan Project, a top-secret American program, aimed to create a weapon of unimaginable power. President Truman faced a grim choice: a costly invasion or the use of the atomic bomb. The decision to unleash the bomb would forever alter human history. The Pacific War was a brutal struggle across a vast ocean dotted with islands. The US Navy, led by Admiral Nimitz, battled island by island, facing fanatical Japanese resistance. The island-hopping campaign was a war of attrition, with the US leveraging its industrial might. Japan, lacking resources, faced a grim determination to fight to the bitter end. Battles like Guadalcanal Tarawa and Iwo Jima were synonymous with savagery and sacrifice. The Battle of Iwo Jima, a symbol of the Pacific War's brutality, saw fierce resistance and heavy casualties. The Battle of Okinawa, the last major obstacle before Japan, was even more costly. Kamikaze pilots and intense fighting resulted in massive civilian and military casualties. Victories at Iwo Jima and Okinawa came at a horrific cost. Military planners estimated an invasion of Japan could result in up to 1 million American casualties. The Manhattan Project offered a glimmer of hope with the atomic bomb. The world watched, unaware of the momentous events unfolding. Los Alamos, the nerve center of the Manhattan Project, was shrouded in secrecy. Scientists led by J. Robert Oppenheimer labored to create a weapon that could end the war. The Trinity test on July 16, 1945, unleashed a force never before seen. The age of nuclear weapons had begun. The Trinity test sent shockwaves across the globe, though its significance was not yet known. President Truman, at the Potsdam Conference, used the bomb's success to take a harder line with Stalin. The debate within the Truman administration about using the bomb against Japan intensified. Truman faced a choice with unthinkable consequences. President Truman faced a decision unlike any other in history. The atomic bomb offered a way to end the war quickly, but at a horrific cost. The debate within his administration was fierce, with arguments for and against its use. Ultimately, the decision rested with Truman, with the fate of millions hanging in the balance. Section 4. A world on the precipice. As the debate raged in Washington, the war in the Pacific raged on. American bombers continued their relentless firebombing campaign against Japanese cities, reducing entire urban areas to rubble. The Japanese people, facing starvation and defeat, clung to the hope of a negotiated settlement, but their leaders, blinded by pride and a misguided sense of destiny, refused to surrender unconditionally. The Potsdam Declaration, issued on July 26, 1945, by the United States, Great Britain and China, demanded Japan's unconditional surrender, warning of prompt and utter destruction if they refused. The declaration, however, made no mention of the atomic bomb, and the Japanese government, interpreting it as a sign of weakness, dismissed it outright. Unbeknownst to the world, the fate of Japan and perhaps the world had already been decided. The Enola Gay, a B-29 bomber named after the pilot's mother, had been prepared for a top-secret mission. It carried in its belly a weapon of unimaginable destructive power, a weapon that would forever alter the course of human history. The world stood on the precipice, unaware of the abyss that awaited. The stage was set for a tragedy of unimaginable proportions, a moment that would test the limits of human morality and usher in a new era defined by the terrifying power of the atom. The world, weary from years of war and yearning for peace, remained oblivious to the momentous events unfolding, unaware that the shadow of the atomic bomb had already fallen upon them. August 6, 1945, dawned like any other summer morning in Hiroshima. The horrors of war felt distant. Citizens went about their day. High above, the drone of an American B-29 bomber went almost unnoticed. This plane carried a device that would unleash hell on Earth. At 8:15 a.m., the unimaginable occurred. The atomic bomb detonated, unleashing a blinding flash and a wave of heat. The city was engulfed in a fiery inferno. Buildings vaporized, their shadows etched onto the ground. People were instantly incinerated. A monstrous mushroom cloud rose miles into the sky. Hiroshima had been transformed into a desolate landscape of rubble and ash. The immediate aftermath of the Hiroshima bombing was a scene of unimaginable chaos and suffering. The wounded, many with horrific burns and injuries, stumbled through the ruins, searching for loved ones, for help, for any sign of hope amidst the devastation. Hospitals, overwhelmed and ill-equipped to deal with the scale of the disaster, struggled to cope with the influx of casualties. Medical supplies quickly ran out, and doctors, themselves injured and traumatized, faced the impossible task of alleviating the suffering of thousands. The true horror of the atomic bomb revealed itself in the days and weeks that followed. A silent killer, radiation sickness, began to claim its victims. People who had initially seemed unharmed fell ill, their hair falling out, their skin covered in lesions. Internal bleeding and organ failure became commonplace, a slow and agonizing death for those exposed to the bomb's invisible poison. The death toll, already staggering, continued to rise. The world, initially stunned into silence by the news of the Hiroshima bombing, struggled to comprehend the scale of the tragedy. Reports from the devastated city, filtered through wartime censorship, painted a grim picture of devastation and suffering. The true extent of the horror, however, would not be fully understood for years to come, as the long-term effects of radiation continued to claim victims and cast a dark shadow over the survivors. Despite the unimaginable destruction of Hiroshima, Japan's leaders, clinging to a delusional hope, hesitated to surrender unconditionally. The military, steeped in a culture of honor and sacrifice, argued for a final suicidal defense of the home islands. Perhaps they believed the Americans had only one such bomb, or perhaps they were blinded by a fatalistic sense of destiny. Whatever their reasoning, their delay would prove tragically costly. On August 9, 1945, just 3 days after Hiroshima, a second B-29 bomber, Boxcar, approached the city of Nagasaki. This time, the target was the city's industrial heart, a complex of shipyards and factories nestled in a valley. At 11:02 a.m., a plutonium implosion-type bomb, nicknamed Fat Man, detonated over the city, unleashing a fiery inferno that rivaled the horrors of Hiroshima. Though geographically less widespread than the Hiroshima bombing, due to the valley's terrain, the Nagasaki blast was no less horrific for those caught within its radius. The same blinding flash, the same searing heat, the same instantaneous destruction of human life and property. It was Hiroshima all over again. A cruel echo of a tragedy the world had hoped would never be repeated. And yet, here it was, a second sun rising over Japan, a searing indictment of humanity's capacity for destruction. The Nagasaki bombing, coming so soon after Hiroshima, had a profound impact on the Japanese leadership. The emperor, a figure revered as a deity, broke with tradition and intervened directly, urging his cabinet to accept the Allies' demands for unconditional surrender. The war, he recognized, could not be won, not at the cost of further suffering and destruction on this unimaginable scale. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito addressed his nation in a radio broadcast, his voice trembling with emotion. He announced Japan's surrender, a moment that sent shockwaves across the globe. For the first time, the Japanese people heard their emperor's voice, a voice tinged with sadness and defeat, but also with a plea for peace and reconciliation. The war, a conflict that had consumed the world in its flames, was finally over. The surrender ceremony aboard the USS Missouri on September 2, 1945, formally marked the end of World War II. The world, weary from years of conflict, breathed a collective sigh of relief. But the celebration was tempered by the sobering realization of the atomic age's dawn. The bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki had brought a swift end to the war, but at a terrible cost, ushering in a new era defined by the terrifying power of nuclear weapons. The mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki marked not only the end of World War II, but also the dawn of a new and uncertain era. The world, forever changed by the terrifying power unleashed, grappled with the implications of the atomic age. The old order had crumbled, replaced by a fragile peace, shadowed by the knowledge that humanity now possessed the means to destroy itself. The immediate aftermath of the war saw the rise of two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, each possessing the atomic bomb and vying for global dominance. The Cold War, a decades-long ideological struggle, cast a long shadow over the world, fueling an arms race that threatened to escalate into nuclear annihilation. The spectre of mutually assured destruction, the chilling acronym MAD, became a terrifying reality, a constant reminder of the stakes involved. Yet, amidst the ashes of war and the anxieties of the Cold War, a spirit of international cooperation emerged. The United Nations, founded in 1945 on the principle of collective security, provided a forum for dialogue and diplomacy, a beacon of hope in a world teetering on the brink. The horrors of World War II, amplified by the atomic bombings, served as a stark reminder of the need for peaceful resolution of conflict and the importance of global cooperation. The physical scars of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the ruined buildings and the lingering radiation served as a constant reminder of the atomic bombing's devastating toll. But the invisible scars, the psychological trauma endured by the survivors, ran even deeper, etching themselves onto the soul of humanity. The Hibakusha, as the survivors of the bombings were known, faced a lifetime of physical and emotional suffering. Many bore the physical scars of their injuries, keloid scars that served as a constant reminder of the inferno they had endured. Others suffered from radiation sickness, a cruel and debilitating illness that claimed countless lives in the years following the bombings. The psychological trauma, the nightmares, the survivors' guilt, the fear of radiation's long-term effects haunted them, casting a long shadow over their lives. The Hibakusha became powerful voices for peace, sharing their stories with the world, urging for nuclear disarmament and reminding us of the human cost of atomic warfare. Their testimonies, often heartbreaking and difficult to hear, served as a powerful indictment of the horrors of war and a plea for a world free from the threat of nuclear annihilation. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki continue to spark debate and controversy, their legacy a complex tapestry of horror, triumph, and uncertainty. The morality of using such devastating weapons, the decision-making process, the targeting of civilian populations, these questions continue to haunt us, challenging our understanding of war, peace, and the very nature of humanity. Some argue that the bombings were a necessary evil, a tragic but ultimately necessary act that brought a swift end to the war and saved countless lives. They point to the fanatical resistance of the Japanese military, the potential for millions of casualties in a prolonged war, and the belief that the atomic bomb was the only way to force Japan's unconditional surrender. Others condemn the bombings as morally reprehensible acts, war crimes that indiscriminately targeted civilian populations and unleashed a weapon of unimaginable destructive power on the world. They argue that Japan was already on the verge of defeat, that other options, such as a demonstration of the bomb's power or a negotiated settlement, were not fully explored. The debate continues, a testament to the enduring legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Despite the horrors, Hiroshima and Nagasaki rebuilt their cities and lives, transforming them into symbols of peace and resilience. The Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park stands as a solemn reminder of atomic warfare and a plea for peace. The park, with its iconic Genbaku Dome, serves as a pilgrimage site for millions each year. Visitors come to pay their respects and learn about the bombing, reflecting on the importance of peace. The legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is a mix of tragedy, hope, and responsibility. It calls on us to strive for a world free from nuclear war.